The More Movement Crew.
Welcome to the More Movement Crew podcast. I'm your host, Kenina Porter, and this is episode 12. So welcome to the show. Thank you for checking us out. The first thing I want to remind you to do is to subscribe to our channel by clicking the button below so that you can have the latest updates on episodes and so you can be a part of the More Movement Crew. So thank you for checking us out. And so since this is episode 12, I am super excited to talk to our next guest. We've been talking about getting together for a little bit and being on our show, but I'm excited to pick his brain. Right. And I'm excited for him to kind of share some of the work that he's been doing. And we're gonna have a good time. All right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, but every guest that's on the show, we always play a game called 5 Questions. Mm-hmm. And so the game is basically for us to just get to know you, get to know what makes you tick, what you like, and all of that. Mm-hmm. So just feel free to answer the questions any way you like. All right.
All right.
So question number 1. What is the most interesting place you've ever traveled to and why?
Oh, wow. I think Ghana was the most interesting place because, I mean, obviously you're being exposed to a completely different culture, and the image we get of Africa or Ghana in this country is not really accurate. So, like
so true.
I grew up in the 80s. Reading like National Geographic magazine and watching PBS, and that doesn't really prepare
Asking
you
for donations.
Yeah, exactly, of what Ghana was actually like. So, yeah.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Cool. I've never been to Africa, but that's on my list.
It was fun. Yeah, really? It was really fun. Yeah, I stayed in Accra, and then we went to Kumasi, which are the 2 major cities. Mm-hmm. But then I got to go out in the villages and stay with a host family in the villages, and that was really fun because I grew up in Eastern Kentucky on a tobacco farm, so I was really well prepared for like working. Yeah. And cutting down coconuts and clearing land and things like that. Yeah.
Like y'all got to work.
And I really wasn't supposed to. Like that wasn't. We were supposed. Like most Americans that go there are just sort of tourists. Yeah. So I go out with my host family that day, and I grab a machete, and we're like cutting pineapples and coconuts, and I like get to work. Right, because I'm from Eastern Kentucky. Like we worked on a tobacco farm. So I come back, I like cut myself. So I come back that day, and like I had blood all over me, and I'm filthy, like just filthy dirt. Yeah. And I was a hero in the village, like because most people that go don't actually.
Oh, just come to look.
They just come to look. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and sort of take pictures, just like a photo op.
Wow.
So my host family, like. They like bragged. They took me around and like, bro, like we have the best worker in our family, and I was like a hero in the village. I just had a great time.
That's pretty cool. So they're used to seeing people just come just to watch.
Mm-hmm. But it was interesting how class dynamics play out in globally.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. All right. So second question is, what gets you out of bed every day?
Oh, wow. Well, I think that goes back to what I was just talking about. I was raised by my grandparents on a tobacco farm. So they worked, 18 hours a day. Growing up in that sort of setting, they got up and milked cows. They had a wood-burning stove. They worked and they didn't take vacations. So I feel like my life is really motivated by the sort of intense life they had, right? So you don't spend a lot of time laying in bed. Yeah. In a
strong work ethic.
Yeah, you need to get up and get going. So when I find myself like depressed or sad or unmotivated or feeling just hopeless, I draw upon that sort of foundational experience.
Yeah, because I think that it kind of gives you like a purpose for getting up. You know that there's work to be done. You don't spend a lot of time sulking.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, they grew up.
Sorry for yourself.
Yeah, they grew up during the Depression. So my grandfather's remedy to like any ailment was work harder.
Work
harder. Yeah.
Wow.
And that can be kind of a problem for children growing up in that setting. We didn't get there wasn't a lot of hugging or discussing of your feelings, but there's there was also like some strong, foundational like motivations there that you can draw upon. So,
and I think definitely like now the culture that we're living in, that's definitely hard work sometimes is not as appreciated. You know, I think that sometimes, particularly because I work with the younger generation, that it's kind of like, you know, I deserve to play more, you know, and work, you know, not as much.
Yeah, I think we're sort of ground into this consumer mentality where we don't,
I agree.
we're long-term effort. We don't see that enough. Like, I mean, we're not exposed to that.
Yeah.
We're exposed to these stories, you know, these sort of success stories.
Overnight.
Yeah, these
success
overnight
stories.
instant gratification where we don't see, like, you know, this is it's sweat and really sustained intensity that you're going to get results from.
That's so true. I totally agree with that, and I think that is one of the things that that's just so important to be able to have that as you've grown up with that experience. Like, you keep that with you.
Yeah.
But yet learning to balance, right?
Yeah, it's about the balance. Yeah,
because then you've got to take the time to rest, because that's overall health.
Yeah, you've got to. So balance that with healing, with
therapy,
with being able to discuss your feelings, with meditation. Yeah, and I think that's a more holistic, like, really, you know, like, that can lead to sort of a healthy dynamic.
Yeah. It's about balance. So I think most things are about balance.
Of course.
All right. So the next question is, if you were a color, what color would represent you?
Oh, wow. You know what? I like that that sort of like navy blue color. Yeah.
Why?
You know, like, I'm really rooted in like radical politics. And you know, like, working class radical movements. I've always, like, drawn from that. So, you know, the people I grew up around wore that color a lot, like working shirts and.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
kind of like
cool.
those colors. So I would say bright red, but I'm trying to move away from that kind of intensity. To more of a navy blue.
You said bright red too. That's real intense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm 42 now, so I think navy blue is a better.
So you transitioned from bright red.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it may kind of just depend. It's like a mood thing too.
There you go. Yeah, different. You know, you need different colors for different situations.
Sometimes you gotta go red.
Sometimes it's just gonna have. Yeah, I mean, when people are not listening, and bright red gets people's attention.
Bright red gets alert.
Yeah.
Okay.
What did somebody tell me today? I said I had a meeting with someone, and I said I think I really hurt them. I think I really hurt their feelings. And someone said, well, some people's feelings need to be hurt. So, you know, it's necessary at times.
Sometimes it is necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one I'm really interested in, because I think we've had conversations just kind of in the past when we worked together about music options. Like, and some of the music that I think you talked about in the past, I'm like, really? You like them? So I'm really interested to see. So it's name 3 songs or artists that are in your playlist.
Oh, wow. You know, I collect records, so I'm listening to music all the time. But I've been listening to a lot of underground hip hop. So I've been listening to that Freddie Gibbs Mad Lib album.
Yeah.
A lot. The new Ghostface album I listen to. I'm not really crazy about it, but I listen to it a lot, I think, out of nostalgia. What else? The new Quell Chris album. Yeah.
Actually, my assistant, who's not here today, she her cousin is Freddie Gibbs.
Oh, really?
And that for real.
Huh.
Her family is originally from Gary, Indiana.
Really?
And Freddie.
Is that where he's from?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so she was telling me about him, and I see her like post things on her like Facebook about Freddie.
That Mad Lib album is great.
Yeah. And so that's what got me into it, when I realized like, like, you know this guy. So I listened to the music and I was like, oh my gosh, he's dope. Like, that's lyrically, he's a beast.
Yeah. And Mad Lib, like, I'm a big jazz fan, so I love Mad Lib. So but I've also been listening to like a lot of free jazz. I always listen to a lot of free jazz, and I listen to a lot of old country.
Really?
Yeah. Like, so I'll go back and forth. If you're in my house, like, you know, it might be Pharoah Sanders, Sun Ra, to like Merle Haggard, to Freddie Gibbs. I mean, there are no boundaries. Like, we love music.
I knew it was a wide range, because I think the conversations we've had you would always bring up like old school, like kind of hip hop music.
Mm-hmm. A lot of R&B.
Underground stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a music freak.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. So, I listen to Curtis Mayfield today.
That's good stuff.
And driving out here, I listen to that Freddie Gibbs album.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely knew you were gonna have an eclectic list of options.
Yeah, I mean, I just like to. I always like. I mean, I just always want to hear like something fresh that keeps me like energized, and thinking, and intellectually stimulated, spiritually stimulated. There's something humorous. So it's you got to have I have to have like a really wide range of music to listen to stay interested.
Oh, definitely. And I feel like there's definitely, this generation has got a lot of artists that are creatively like really saying something, and they're really have things to say. And so we are in a really socially conscious, generation where they're searching for meaning in new ways, and they're mixing genres, I think, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's a beautiful thing to see. I mean, some of it is not so good, but some of it is really, really good.
Yeah, the corporatized hip hop and stuff, like I hate that. But what's going on in the underground is so good right now. The people, and I tell people all the time, people are like, "Well, there's no good hip hop music." I'm like, "You're crazy! Like it's." You
got to look. It's not going to be at the top of the charts.
But I think it's always been like that. You always had, you always had to look. Whether it was like, when I was growing up. I'm 42, so I was really into punk rock, like Fugazi and hardcore and that stuff. But I mean, you had to look for it then. So during that time, I grew up in it was a real sort of anti-corporate movement in the 90s that's still going on.
Yeah, definitely. Even with hip hop, like I was watching, I think it was like the evolution of hip hop, and then it kind of takes you through like the journey of hip hop, and then what it does is it looks at each region, and then when it gets to California, it like goes to Oakland and the history, and then NWA and like all of that. So
Did you see that movie, The Defiant Ones, about Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine?
No.
Oh, that's so good. It's really? It's like a 4-part series.
What's it on?
I think it's on HBO.
HBO?
Yeah, HBO, yeah.
I love documentaries.
It's great. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen.
Really?
It's so well done. Yeah.
I gotta check it out. I'm totally.
And I actually met the producer. Not to go off track. I met the producer. He's actually working on a film about housing and housing justice, and
So are you going to be working on a documentary soon? Or?
I'm interviewing.
You're in it. Oh, okay. Yeah. Dope. I remember.
Yeah.
I thought we mentioned that, but I remember you said something about that at one point.
Yeah, his name's Stephen Williams. He's incredible. I'll go ahead and give him a shout out on the podcast.
Might as well.
Yeah.
All right. So last question is, what is the best advice you were given?
Oh, the best advice. Well, I've kind of heard this in a lot of different ways, but the best advice I've ever been given is you never have to laugh at a joke if it's not funny.
Really?
Yeah.
So just like straight face, stone face.
Well, but it's not literal, right?
Okay.
So like if you really break that down, it took me a long time to figure that out. So my grandfather would say that, and then he would also say, what he was getting at is that, your happiness is not measured outside of you. If you're laughing at jokes that aren't funny, you're going along to get along.
Yeah.
You're not really being true to yourself, right?
So it's a deeper meaning.
It's much deeper. Yeah. So he always said that, and he always said things like, always. He would always say things like, if you know what side of the road people are on, you never have to worry about bumping into them, right? So things like that.
Yeah.
And so as I got older, I realized what he was saying. There's a great book called The Courage to be Disliked. And that's what it's talking about. Like, you have to figure out who you are and be true to that, because that's really where happiness comes from. And happiness comes from the ability to have an opinion, stand on it, be true to yourself in the face of other people who may not agree with it and may not like you. So, I think there's a great William Blake quote. I can't think of it right now, but I think everybody in this world knows within them what they're supposed to be doing. And if you're not true to that, if you don't do that, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So when my daughter comes home, when kids go to school, they have like these grading systems, like little kids, like you get a color for the day or something. So I ask her, like, how was your day? And she'll say, oh, I got a green. And I'm like, I don't want to know that. Because if you say I got a green, you're allowing someone else to measure the quality of your day, which could be subjective, right? And your happiness then is contingent upon how someone else graded your day. And if you do that, you're never really going to be happy. So I'm like, did you laugh today? Did you have fun? Did you hang with your friends? Because you could have done all those things, and that teacher might have given you a red.
But to you, you had a great day.
But to you, had a great day. So, and we kind of condition people to sort of lock into this mindset that somehow our success, our happiness is measured outside of us. And then you go through life laughing at jokes that aren't really funny. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So.
Wow, that's really good advice though. Like your grandfather was dropping gems.
Yeah.
Like gems.
Yeah.
Like that is it creates just such a better quality of life when you see things that way.
Yeah.
Right? You know, it's like I know who I am, I know the position I stand, and it's okay for me to be the only one, right? It's okay for me to be be on this side.
And I don't even think I realized what he was saying until much later in life. But what he was saying was like, you got to love yourself first.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's good advice. That's the best advice.
That's good advice. That's good advice, audience. You guys should take it. All right. So that was the game 5 questions, and so now we enter into the fun part of the segment. So I'm going to let you officially introduce yourself and kind of what you do, and then we can just go from there.
Yeah. Well, I'm Josh Poe. I'm a city planner. I'm a geographer. I'm an activist, and I'm a professor. I'm an adjunct professor now. So throw that in there.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. A lot of I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, really poor, and our professional lives oftentimes are shaped by our personal lives.
So true.
So growing up in Eastern Kentucky and on a tobacco farm and being poor sort of radicalized me politically in a lot of ways. So I was really drawn to radical politics as a teenager. And if you grew up in the 90s and you were drawn to radical politics, a lot of people moved to Seattle. That's where it was happening at that time. So I ended up going to Seattle in like 98 or something like that. And got involved in housing organizing, labor organizing, economic justice issues. I got trained as an organizer and became an organizer. Was basically involved canvassing and knocking on knocked on people's doors for about 5 years and went to protest for about 5 years, and sort of led me to my current work. Really, if you grow up in Appalachia, and you kind of realize at some point that the same entities that really exploited your community and destroyed your community also crafted a narrative that really blamed the people in that community for their own situation. Right. Yeah, so
true.
So I grew up just kind of being really angry about that. Angry because my grandparents were like the hardest working people that I met. I knew that like their situation was not the result of their own personal choices, right? Like something else was happening here.
Yeah.
So my work in one form or another has always been about countering that narrative, either through protesting or organizing or data visualization or research, or, it's always been about, really creating this sort of counter map against that dominant institutional oppressive narrative. So I left Seattle. Ended up coming to Louisville in 2008. Then I went to college at Berea College, and I came to Louisville in 2008 for grad school. My wife was from here, is what brought me here. And I'm in the School of Urban and Public Affairs, and I'm researching the history of city planning. I was really drawn to city planning after seeing the gentrification in Seattle and the gentrification in Cincinnati. I got really interested in city planning, and I started researching the history of city planning in Louisville and really trying to tell that story. And what I found was like there was this history of city planning that really wasn't told. And there's this history of Louisville that really wasn't told.
Talked about.
It wasn't really talked about in like a dominant institutional setting, particularly in academia. So I'm sort of bringing that, slowly, piece by piece out into the open. And a lot of the faculty was not crazy about that. So I don't know if you've experienced this. I know a lot of people where you're in an institutional setting and you're bringing forth this work that maybe isn't that's sort of a counter narrative to what is structured, what the institution perpetuates, and you get gaslighted somewhat.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's really hard for people coming out of poor communities because there's an imposter syndrome there anyway. So people would say, well, he just doesn't understand data. He's misinterpreted policy. That's not really how it, and then you sort of question yourself, right? Maybe that's true. And that's sort of how institutional gaslighting happens, and it's very oppressive. And what happened to me, fortunately, was Dr. Blaine Hudson, who was the Dean of Arts and Sciences at U of L, became aware of my work and was really interested in my work. And Dr. Hudson led an insurgency in the 60s that shut down U of L, right? So he came out of the movement, and so they shut down U of L. They occupied, I think it was 1969, occupied the administrative offices at U of L because they didn't have a Black Studies department. So the reason U of L has Pan-African Studies is because of an insurgency, right? The white administrators just didn't wake up one day and decide to make that happen. So Dr. Hudson became aware of my work and was really encouraging of it. And that really emboldened me, and it legitimized what I was doing in a lot of ways. And we need that. Young people need that. They need people who have that sort of legitimacy to stand in the space with them and encourage them. So I try to do that a lot right now with what I do. So once Dr. Hudson sort of stood in that space with me, the faculty sort of left me alone. And we started looking for Louisville's redlining maps. And that was in probably 2011. I graduated by that time. So like in my spare time,
you just continued the work?
I just continued the work. Yeah, it never was an academic endeavor for me anyway, right? I always considered my relationship with academia to be criminal in some ways. Not criminal in the sense like I'm doing something wrong. But just if I'm there, I'm really extracting.
You're a part of the...
I'm really, I'm in it, but I'm not really of it. I'm still linked to like, militant research and subversive intellectualism outside of the academy. So we're looking for that. We're looking for those maps, and it took a long time to find them. Didn't find them until 2013, 2014, and Dr. Hudson passed away during that time. So, but I always like to talk about, whenever I talk about myself, I like to talk about just how he encouraged the work and how he contributed to it. So, I found those maps and ended up...
and where did you find them? How did you find the maps?
They were, we were just looking through all these different archives around. We started looking for them in Louisville, and we realized after a certain amount of time that they were not here. They weren't at the FILSA, and they weren't like in the basement of Metro government or anything like that. I'm sure, and we know that they were here. They are here. Like major banks had them, but they're not coming off them and letting us know that they have them. So ended up finding them in the cartographic archives in Washington, D.C. And during this time, a lot of other people were looking for them also. So the Karen Institute in Cleveland, Robert K. Nelson at the Digital Scholarship Lab in Richmond, Virginia. So we started collaborating and found them there. And a lot of the redlining maps were kind of unearthed around the same time. So once I found them, I really started working on how to display them. And I just ended up displaying them through the story map process, and it got a lot of attention. So through that process of doing all that work, I ended up sort of losing my professional planning career and got more involved. Over time, I've become more and more involved in housing activism and less involved in like professional, white collar city planning work. So I kind of came full circle in this process. I'm really back doing organizing, doing activism again, and I'm kind of like you. We, like a lot of people we know, spend a lot of time in nonprofits. Right. Yes. So I've just came full circle. But now I do a lot of speaking, a lot of presenting. I'm probably going to write a book in the next 4 or 5 years.
Awesome.
I guess. So yeah.
Yeah. So with all of the speaking that you do, I've been privileged to be able to sit in a couple of your presentations, and I've watched a couple of your presentations. In terms of the feedback that you get or the questions, because I know that you do presentations amongst different groups, right? You've done some in St. Stephen's, and I saw you did one at the Fraser Museum. So you have different populations that you present to. So what is some of the feedback you've been getting for when you've been presenting?
Well, it's different. I mean, it's different by it's the feedback is different by geography. It's different by race. It's different by class. It's different by generation. So the presentations have really it's really changed the way I think in a lot of ways, just presenting this information. And it's changed the way I understand white supremacy. And I've really gained a lot more knowledge about the functionality of white supremacy and the different ways, the different sort of functionary ways it operates in society. So I started out presenting in the West End, mostly to black boomers. And that was a very different experience. So I'm presenting this information to people who lived through that.
Right.
And who were very much aware of it. And that was, it was really sort of a cut and dry way of presenting. And I'm presenting sort of like the mailman delivers the mail, right? He just delivers it. He doesn't really stick around to see if you got a bill or if it's a check, not real concerned about how it's received, just presenting information in a way as a researcher that's very factual, making sure that information is clear and easy to understand. And through that process, I think it was cathartic for people who lived through that and experienced like the gaslight. People knew
because it validated.
It validated a lot, but I'm not really presenting like information that's like, it's not a revelation for people. People were very much. Well, I think for people that lived through that. And then I started presenting in white areas. And to wealthy white people, and that's when I wasn't prepared for just how powerful white fragility is and the way white fragility operates. And what happens with white fragility is you present this information, and suddenly you're not dealing with the information. You're not dealing. Structural racism is not the topic anymore. The topic is someone else's discomfort. And white fragility, it's like a flame. Like if you give it oxygen, it just takes over the whole room.
Well, you started. I remember the actual presentation that I said in. Like you started with that. You opened.
So I started doing that.
So you started open with that. But when you started with that, I remember kind of like looking around, and I'm like, I just wanted to see people's response to that, just to see how they would take that, Well, but it allowed them to. I'm glad that you started it that way, because it helped them to start to deal with their emotions prior to you going into the actual information. So it kind of gave it.
I had to. So for a long time, I was supposed to. Metro government sponsored the work. And they gave me like, $12,000 to kind of finish it up. And I was supposed to do the presentations that Metro government did. But after one presentation, they decided against that. Because I talked about white supremacy, I talked about reparations, and that's where they were, so this is how white fragility functions. They were so concerned about the way I presented that they chose someone else to present that work. And that's what I say. It's a functionary of white supremacy. And if we buy into that too much, we're just playing into that power structure. So I had to start calling it out from the beginning, right? Because what ended up happening is I would present, and people would have a problem with the way I presented. It was too harsh, so I had to. There was always this sort of instructional narrative that I needed to change the way I presented. And there again, that goes back to just the way white supremacy functions, because one of the things that happened when Metro government presented it and the way they presented it is that the topic sort of became more about white people's moral redemption through acknowledging this. Right? So we're acknowledging this. Now we want a pat on the back, right? Kind of like that book To Kill a Mockingbird. And To Kill a Mockingbird, the black characters only exist for Atticus Finch's moral redemption, right? They only exist to elevate him. And if you look at like Metro government's program, Lean Into Louisville, and those things that the city's doing, that's kind of it's the same thing. There are no policy responses. There's no budgetary response. There's not any mechanism to actually redistribute wealth around this. We're just going to talk about it and make sure people feel better as a result, right? So the issue is that it's about education, as if people don't know this existed. So I talked to therapists, and I talked to people who had really done deep equity work, and I really, got a lot more educated about how to deal with white fragility, and that's when I started developing different ways of handling it.
Right, which I think I think it's important to do that. To take the time to figure out how to navigate the different spaces. But I think aside from the way that you present, I think that is having worked with you, right? you are very, very direct, right? And I say that meaning people can, people feel like that could be abrasive. They feel like that could be real harsh, right? Yeah. But I think that being direct is a gift in a sense, because you're not putting any frills on it, right? You're not going to sugarcoat it. You're giving the facts as they are, right? And so I think that people have always had a problem with truth, right? Truth is always something that has been difficult to swallow, which is why the history books present the way that they do, which is why education teaches what it does. So I think that in itself is just like stating facts is difficult. But for you, I feel like that's just, and that's natural to you, right? It's how you express, right? Like, I can't do it any other. Is what I'm saying. Very simply put, I can't do it any other way. This is the facts, and because I feel so strongly about it, I have to present it the way that it's supposed to be presented, if that makes sense. So that's just me knowing you personally. And so I appreciate you saying that, you had to take some time to like think about how to.
But it's also about freedom. Because if we could be direct all the time, we would be, I think. And so, so we get caught in these, it's about power. We get caught in these power dynamics where people will convince us that truth ain't supposed to be told. And then we just have to play into that all the time. So I kind of put myself, I put myself in a place where, I'm going to tell this is one area where I'm just going to tell the truth, and it's going to be direct, and the chips are going to fall where they may. And that's, that's kind of what brought me back to activism. I didn't just wake up one day and said, okay, I'm going to reject my professional career. You do that too often, those decisions will be made for you. So I handle white fragility a lot different now in the presentations. And I just tell people straight up, because there was a point there where I was handling it a little bit too harshly. And then there was another point where I was giving it a little bit too much oxygen. And I presented in Birmingham, and this lady pulled me aside, a black lady pulled me aside, and she said, to the white people in the audience, and she said, you need to just drop it. And just drop it.
Wow.
And after that, I thought, okay, that's it. I don't need any more. I don't need to think about. I don't need to overthink this. That was good advice. So now I just tell people straight up, like, white fragility is prioritizing one group's discomfort over another group's oppression, and we're just not going to do that. And I think framing it like that really sets the tone.
I agree. I think it really does.
There's just so much urgency about this. People are dying, right? People are dying through police killings. People are dying through evictions. We've got a home. I mean, like we just don't have the time to
feed
worry
people's
about
emotions.
So,
just the.
I mean, where I'm from, people still don't have clean drinking water. So so we just have to contextualize that, and I don't think we need to push people off a cliff like white middle class people or white wealthy people. We don't need to push them off the cliff, but we do need to push them toward the edge,
towards action,
to create that discomfort so that we can change things.
And I like how in your presentation at the end you kind of open up the opportunity for people to, to make comments, have questions, but you also leave them with actionable items. Like they were things you were like, hey, if you felt like you were moved by what I said and you want to do something, these are the ways that you can do it. Contact this person. When you're in these spaces and they're having this conversation, say something. Like, so you gave actionable ways for them to do things within their community or within their space. And I think that's important. Because I think that it's almost like they go through like stages of shock, right? Shock and like, but then when they come down after they've gotten the facts and all of the information, then they say, okay, now how do I, well, hopefully they say, how do I play a role in this and how can I be, somebody that helps to create change?
And I've added a lot to that. Like I give people a lot more specific things to do now, because there's always this question of, well, what do I do? And as a movement researcher, you have all this responsibility of not only like, doing all this research of unearthing this historic, oppression and documenting it, but you also have to come up with things for people to do now that you have, because if you don't, then they're going to say, we didn't give us anything to do. So they're always this way, white supremacy functions, it's like this multiple-headed serpent. It functions in so many different ways. People are always looking for ways to sort of discount the information. And, it's like living on a street and there's a house down the street that's on fire, but some people live far enough away they don't feel the heat from the flame, so they really don't feel a responsibility to do anything about it. So.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I came up with that because people kept asking me, how did you get interested in this? And I'm like, I'm not really interested in it.
Yeah.
Because I think that goes back to framing it as interest. People can say, well, I'm just not interested in that. Like, this is not what people who do movement work, it's not what people are thinking about on the weekends.
Definitely. And I mean, if you don't step outside of your community, right? If you don't interact with anyone of color, if you do things that don't allow you to even go outside of your neighborhood or your whatever status, then of course you're not going to be affected by it, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing in presenting to white people and doing anti-capitalist, anti-racist work. Toni Morrison said it really well, like white supremacy, it does impact white people. It's like a sickness. And you remember, did you see the interview she did with Charlie Rose?
No, I haven't seen that one.
So that's a great interview. She says, it's really the white people's problem, and they need to do something about it. So
I gotta watch that. I gotta go back and watch that one.
Yeah, that's.
You just made me think about, I don't know what triggered it, but Chelsea Handler did a documentary on white privilege.
Yeah, I almost watched that the other day. Is it good?
You just watch it. I want to know what you think.
I'll check that out. Yeah.
But anyway, so there was a scene where she goes to different groups of white people. And so she goes to like Oktoberfest and she's just like asking questions. Do you think racism still exists? And so what came to my mind is that she went to Orange County, probably where she lives. And she asked a bunch of women that lived in Orange County. And was like, so you guys think racism still exists? And they were like, I just think people just need to get over it.
Why can't people get over it?
I just think that they're exaggerating. They just keep bringing it up, And so it was just like, it was that. It was like, they truly think that it's exaggerated because there's nothing in their world that sees that, right? And she was like, well, are you afraid when the police stop you? Do you ever feel scared? And they're like, no, I never feel scared. So it was like helping them to understand that. And
I've talked to a lot of people about that recently because a lot of people ask me, do you think it's just a question of ignorance? And I don't. I think it's sort of this convenient ignorance or pseudo ignorance because it's not just about, I think people know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I hear that a lot. Like, people just don't know. If we educate them, it'll change. I think they know very well. If they didn't know, there would not be such an effort to control the narrative. I have had a lot of really intense conversations with white people after my presentations. You would not, and I can't believe, it's like I'm so, I like have to really not be enraged when I have those conversations. So I did these evaluations, or I do these evaluations where I ask people questions before the presentation and I ask people questions after. One of the questions is, have you seen evidence of redlining in your life? 80% of white respondents have been answering that no, which I was blown away by. It's 2019, right? Wow. Like, I couldn't believe that. So I had a conversation with the guy the other day. After my presentation, he sits down and he says, I agree with most of what you said. He said, I've rented property to people for years. This is a very wealthy man in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm not going to say his name, but he's very, very wealthy. He said, I've rented property for a long time. He said, and white people, a lot of white people don't take care of the property any better than black people do. And I'm like, that's what you got out of the presentation.
That's it.
That's it. And I'm like, I don't think we're on the same page with this. Then he said, you being from Eastern Kentucky, he said, I bet you understand that. He said, because people down there really have a hard time taking care of their property. And I'm like,
he said through the whole presentation.
Like, that's what you got out of the presentation. And I said, do you have I said, do you clean your own house or do you hire people to clean your house? Do you have maids and like people that take care of your and he said, oh yeah. And I'm like, well, why? He's like, well, we just don't have time. We're busy. And I was hoping he was making the connection there.
He wasn't.
Yeah, but that was a time that I could have taken to educate him, but I just let it go. Sometimes it's best just to let it go.
It can be exhausting.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, and what impact are you really going to have with that?
Yeah,
situation?
you didn't want to be there all day either.
Yeah, so so when I present, you hope it stirs people to action. You hope there's some sort of change out of that, but a lot of times there's not.
Yeah.
But I'm not working under this guise that a presentation is the theory of change. Anyway, that's why we're doing organizing around these efforts. Now, what we'd like to do is get funding for organizing out of these presentations. Okay. But that's in the works. Yeah, that hasn't came to fruition yet either.
So speaking of kind of in the works, so what are some things that are to come, or what ultimately are you wanting to? How do you want this to kind of grow and take wings and this work?
Well, I'm sort of hyper local, so something that happened this summer. I got to go to UCLA to participate in a housing justice housing justice methodology summer institute at UCLA with Ananya Roy, who's one of my academic heroes. And Ananya has written a lot about poverty, but she took the stance of sort of the opposite of most academics. Most academic work is really focused on impact at communities, right? So we're going to explain poverty. So we're going to go into poor communities and extract stories from people and use their experiences to expose failed policy. Ananya focused on the World Bank, and that's really what I'm interested in. Because being from Eastern Kentucky, it's a lot like it's very similar to Black neighborhoods. We're over researched and under resourced, right? So people are just researched to death. So let's stop doing that. Let's stop telling our story and let's start telling their story. So let's focus on root cause, right? Let's focus on telling the dominant institutions in a community. Let's tell their story. Let's tell where the money's coming from. Let's tell where the investments are coming from. Let's research real estate scams. So that's really what drives me in terms of research. So a colleague and I, my colleague Jessica Bellamy and I just started the Root Cause Research Center, which is really sort of based around that idea. And we're going to launch an incubation model out of that where impacted people, where we help people get research training, basically the idea that everyone should be able to do research. Research doesn't just exist in academia, that people can do their own research. And not this sort of extractive research where people are telling stories like the nonprofit model, but actually researching entrenched institutions and systems of oppression in their communities to really embolden people so that people can be their own advocates. So that's one thing that we're doing. I'm doing a few different things. I'm teaching at Simmons College right now, and that's really the sort of political education class. And then I work really closely with Black Lives Matter and Chanel Helm on doing housing justice work and community organizing. So one of the things going to UCLA really made me aware of is just how much people are suffering in Louisville, Kentucky right now. We've got 11,000 evictions filed as of August. We've got a housing crisis. We've got a situation in the West End where the median income is $22,000 a year. And rents are going up. So we could see a massive increase in homelessness. And
we already have.
Yeah, exactly. We already have. So I don't want this show to be this is going to be the most depressing topic to talk about. But
there's work to be done.
But there's a lot of work to be done. So ultimately, I want to go to UCLA, get my PhD, and write a book. But there's a lot of work to be done. So I'm, I kind of have I have, like I said, I don't necessarily have the best relationship with academia. So I want to build bridges with academia that really connects academia with movement work. And that's something I really want to do here in Louisville.
And didn't Harvard, didn't you do some work with, didn't they
I got an award.
Adopt some of your research?
I got an award from Harvard. Launched a Map of the Month contest in 2017, and that redlining project won the first award. It was the first award given to it. So yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like honestly, I feel like you are right in the lane that you should be in. I feel like at this place. Yeah. I feel like definitely you are just in a really good space. I feel like you're operating in where you should be.
Thank you.
And I just want to see you continue to do the work. One, because I know that at the heart of like who you are, that is what you love. And always working with you, I knew that was what you love.
Yeah. So. And I think that's one, I think for a lot of us, when we love this work, we end up working for nonprofits, and you work for these NGOs, and you go to work for NGOs because you love that work. And then you realize that you're sort of hooked into this white saviorism work that really, and most of the time, white saviorism is serviceable to state capitalism in some way. And you end up sort of not feeling good about what you're doing. And I've worked for so many nonprofits like that where you go in and it's like, this seems like a great environment.
That is true. I mean, it's true. But then I think when you figure out, if you are paying attention, you just kind of figure out what you really are passionate about and figure out ways for you to really do the impact work, and really partner with people who really want to do that work.
Exactly.
So I think that's great that you have found that space.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy. Funding's always the issue. Yeah.
I think I'm trying to remember a quote that you said. You said, unfortunately, I don't know a lot of people with something about that. You were like, I have a lot of great ideas, and I have I forgot what I can't remember the quote. I can't remember the quote. Never mind. But it was just funny how you said that.
I mean, I've been working on a mapping project for a while called "Who Owns West Louisville," and I'm just trying to make a map, and this was done in Appalachia too. That shows like most of the land's owned by people outside of the community. And in trying to get funding for that, what you run into is when you go to philanthropists and you can get, it's the same thing of trying to get funding for organizing, right? So we try to get money to fund organizers to do a tenants union or a renters union. What you realize with philanthropy, you go so far into that and you realize that the people who have the wealth, who could have an impact on changing the dynamics, are really complicit in the harm. And that's what you hit, right? So you're not going to fund a renters union because you fund a renters union, you're going to build power in communities. Those renters could then go on strike and impact
you.
Yeah. Same thing with making a map, right? Who owns West Louisville? So that could impact the people who could fund that. That's the dynamic that.
So what are some other ways that you think funding can happen in terms of how do you get funding aside from just philanthropy or finding people to give money? How are ways that other funding ways or avenues?
I think there are some courageous funders around the country, and they're starting to step up. I mean, I think some people are starting to realize that we really need to look at funding justice work if we want real solutions, and I think those funders are coming forward. So I think Robert Wood Johnson's a good example. The Humana Foundation here is a good example. So I think philanthropy is changing a little bit, and it's changing slowly. But there again, you still have to be careful as an activist because the philanthropic money can come in and really alter what it is you're doing. A good example of that is an article Megan Ming wrote about movement capture, about how the NAACP was working on anti-violence work and when they first started in the 20s, working on anti-lynching work, and philanthropists came and gave them a lot of money, and they shifted toward education, right? So I think that's always a problem in doing, and she called that movement capture. And I think you saw that with BLM too, where BLM, went to meet with Obama, and some of the leaders ended up endorsing, Hillary Clinton, and really got moved out of that space that they were in, really focusing on police terrorism. So that's always a problem. But crowdfunding is a great way to go. And Chanel Helm, who I work with really closely, does a lot of crisis relief efforts for families, and it's all crowdfunded. So they've actually bought houses and got houses gifted to them. They do a lot of direct giving as a form of reparations and restorative justice. And when I put out like Venmo or PayPal request, I always think that like wealthy philanthropists are going to fund it. All my requests they're always like under $20 from mostly people in West Louisville, and I'll kind of take it down because that's not really who I'm not really going around asking for those small individual donations, but that's who usually ends up funding the work. So,
well, I mean, I feel like like you said though, there are philanthropists that will realize that it's meaningful work, it's necessary work.
Yeah. It's changing.
Just gotta keep plowing at it.
Things are changing. I mean, people ask me this all the time, like, how do you maintain hope? And like, I'm more hopeful than I've ever been. I mean, we're getting ready to live in a world without boomers, you know?
Oh.
Or at least a world where boomers have less and less power every day.
Yeah.
And you kind of feel that shift. And if there's enough time left on the planet, then there's
hope.
We can make some real changes.
There's hope.
Yeah. So
that's great. That's great. I think that's a really great way to kind of conclude the show. But I always ask every guest on the show the question, when did you know that there was more? So I'll give you a little bit of context to the question. I feel like everyone who strives to achieve something great had a pivotal moment in their life where they're like, yeah, I got to go for this, or there's more to just what I'm doing now. When was that for you?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. We are all so connected to like an identity. Identity shapes who we are. And as a kid, I was always like the smart kid, right? Like I was the smart kid. I was I was intelligent. I read a lot. I was very rebellious, but I was like the smart kid. So I don't know if they had this. Are you from Elizabethtown?
Yeah, Fort Knox.
They have this in Kentucky where like, I don't know if they still have it. It was kind of problematic, but it was like the gifted and talented program.
I remember that.
So I was in that program.
I think my sister was in that. Actually.
Yeah, so they had like a debate club and they had like a chess team, and I was in that, and like I was in that space and like really feeling being in that space, really embracing that space. And some parents complained that I was in that program because class plays a huge role, right? And in Eastern Kentucky, people are villainized.
So they felt like you shouldn't have been in there because of your background?
Because of my family.
Wow.
So I was taken out of that program. And it really destroyed my identity in a lot of ways. And it ended up like I became very rebellious. And it shook me. I kind of lost my identity, right? Because your identity is shaken up when that happens. So I'm no longer the smart kid. I'm in shop class, right? And I was really encouraged to like work with my hands, right? So
that's how you got into carpentry and stuff.
That's how I got into carpentry and stuff, but it's not really what I wanted to do. And then my grandparents, they were like, that's good. You don't need to go to college anyway. Like, learn a trade. Like, and that's sort of what for people where I'm from, that's sort of what we're told. So I had a hard time. I was a juvenile delinquent, and I had a really hard time. And when I got involved with like radical politics, and I got trained as an organizer, and a lot of really like radical people, trained me and kind of explained that to me. That gave me my identity back, right? And it gave me like, I was able to explain why these things happen on a real deep structural level, which is basically a political education. And that's why I'm so big on like helping young people get a political education. Because if we don't have a way to explain that, we internalize it. And when we internalize it, it creates all sorts of internal trauma. Yeah. Because our identity is ripped out, right? And that's how I got into Marxism, and that's how I got into activism, because I want to, now I have a place to take that pain. And so that's what really helped me, was getting that radical political education. And I was doing a redlining presentation at Mazik to some students at Mazik, like middle school students. Really? Yeah, and a young lady came up to me afterward, a black student, and she said, "Thank you for the work that you do." She said, "This makes me want to try harder in school." She said, because I always thought that there's individual identity, but then there's group identity, right? And that's we don't even want to get into that. Yeah. So that's a whole other episode. Exactly. So she said, I always thought it was us, that there was something about us that's why I couldn't succeed. But after looking at this redlining stuff, and I see that the system was rigged against us, it makes me want to try harder, and it makes me want to fight back. And I think that for me was huge.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's purpose work, Josh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's that's what you're supposed to be doing.
That's what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. And when you know what you're supposed to be doing, you just got to get busy doing it.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then get ready to be sad.
Yeah.
Because we can always find a reason not to.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, this was great.
I really appreciate it. You want to kind of give some information on where people can connect with you or find more information about the work you do?
I'm on Twitter. Like I am all about Twitter. Joshua Poe _Lou.
Okay.
LOU. So they can always find me there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I will post that information under this video so you can check him out on Twitter. But thank you for tuning in to our show. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.